and 3. I'm going to do any kind of Q&A you got on my life technical experiences, technical entrepreneurship experiences. So that's where we're going. For starters, cross your arms for me.
All right, everybody got their arms crossed?
Now, look down. Are you left over right or right over left?
All right. Now, do it the other way. Everybody, I'm getting some giggles. It's kind of hard, isn't it? If you take your hands out again and you do it 20 times, you're going to do it the same way. All right? Now, not that left over right or right over left is any better than the other one, but this is my point. We have ways that we do things. We have patterns that we fall into. My pattern for the company that I started would be completely different than whatever pattern that you might develop. Every one of them is pretty unique. There's not a right way or a wrong way, a better way or a worse way. There are just many, many different ways. So tonight I want to talk with you first of all about technology. And we'll spend about 10 minutes on that. So I'm going to blast you really fast with some thoughts about technology, economics. Techonomics is a portmanteau. That's a French word that means you cram two things together, kind of like a vertical foot locker. Okay? Technology, entrepreneurship. Economics. With the thought being that technology is the innovation of new ideas. It's the mutant, so to speak. And economics is that good old, you got to make more than it costs you to sell it. All right? So back in the 90s, we had this idea that I could lose money on each transaction but make up for it in quantity. That didn't happen. And then we had the dot-com bust. So technology is always developing new ideas, different ways, better ways to do things, but not all of them ever see the light of day because of the economic side of things. The ones that make money, the ones that the marketplace determines are satisfactory and sufficient are the ones that get to go further. So I want to share with you 3 laws of techonomics, and I can call them laws and I can call them the first 3 laws of techonomics because I made the word up, okay? So therefore I can define what techonomics is. The first one is called Moore's Law, and it has to do with exponentially increasing electronics speed or exponentially diminishing electronics cost. Take your pick. The second law is Metcalfe's law, that has to do with exponentially increasing connectivity as far as communications is concerned. And the third law is after a guy named Ronald Coase, Coase's law, and that has to do with the make or buy decision transaction cost analysis and perfect information. So we'll talk about those 3 laws. The reason I want you to understand those is whether you're on the business side of this equation or whether you're on the engineering side of this equation, this is what our future economy is being built on right now, as of the last 10 years, and even much more rapidly now. So I want you to always remember these. Moore's Law, a guy named Ronald Moore was a graduate student at the Stanford University in the 60s. And he was working on aerospace electronics, and he noticed that every 2 years, as he was there for 4 years, that on a silicon wafer, they packed twice as much stuff. Well, the cost was the silicon wafer itself. How much stuff you got on it would determine how fast it went or how smart it would be or whatever, the number of transistors there. So he saw that once, he saw it twice in his 4-year career. He wrote a paper in '65 that said every 2 years that the number of components on a silicon wafer is going to double for the same cost. Hence more computational capability, simple thought. Now, what that translates into, and he actually started a company on that. Any of you ever heard of Intel? He was one of the co-founders of Intel, along with about 4 other guys from Fairchild Semiconductor. And Intel, to my knowledge, is the first company that built its position in the marketplace by cannibalizing its product every 2 years. So what do I mean? Every 2 years, Intel would come out with twice as fast a product for the same price. And every 2 years, they do it again. So here's my question for you. How many of you are using a portable computer that's more than 4 years old? 1. You're a dinosaur. Everybody else? Case in point, because it slows down, because there's more capability that you want. Faster, cheaper, lighter, smaller, whatever. And what that has meant, that's occurred since 1965. All right? Now, for those of you that are business majors, I know I have to explain this. For engineers, this is easy. This is not linear. It is exponential. All right? So, being exponential on a linear scale, that is a linear progression. That is an exponential progression. It's huge. Now, what that means to you as a consumer and as a person is that if you go back to 1969, the best computational capability that an entire nation could put together, put a man on the moon, the lunar module. Had all the money, all the resources, all the technology resources, all of whatever they needed, all right? And every one of you that's sitting in here has a cell phone in your pocket that has about an order of magnitude more computational capability than put a man on the moon in 1969. Now, you're not quite old enough for that, but I am. I lived through that. And so the really interesting thing about Moore's Law, and the reason that I think it's the first law of economics, is it is continuing to happen. We didn't just get to a point and, oh, that computer's fast enough, it's cheap enough, it's fine enough, we're stopped. That is going up through the roof while we are sitting here today. What does that mean? It means that electronics are cheap enough to have them in your tennis shoes. If you're a 3-year-old with the little blinkers, you know, they're in your watch. They're soon going to be in your glasses. They're going to be in things that you swallow. They're going to be in everything that you use. Pencils, phones, tablets, pens, doesn't matter. Intelligence is going to be in everything. What that means is anything that you can conceive in your mind that's physically possible computationally, at some point in time is going to be cheap enough to do for the masses. Okay, number 2, Metcalfe's law. Metcalfe was a guy that founded 3Com. He was the first guy that decided it'd be a pretty cool thing to tear a PC apart, put a board in it, and let it connect to another PC. And what he realized is that as he did that in his little laboratory, he had a PC and a PC, and he made a connection. How nice. 2 PCs, 1 connection. Then he added another one more board, and lo and behold, there were 3 connections. And then he added another PC and another board, and now there were 6 connections. What's happening there is an exponential progression. So when I've got 20 million users on, say, AOL, and I add 1 more user, I've got 20 million and 1 new connection. What that means is what we had in the good old days was something called the law of 7. It meant that if I needed to get a message to somebody anywhere on the globe, I could get it through 7 intermediaries and it would get there. All right. So for instance, if I had some reason to get a prayer to the Pope, I could get that prayer to my local father, and he could get it to the bishop, to the archbishop, across the pond, to another archbishop, to somebody in the Vatican, to their secretary, to the Pope. Boom. I'm 7 degrees removed from getting my message there. Today, what do I have to do to get a message to the Pope? I bet you in 5 minutes I could go to the Vatican website, look up the Pope's email address, and send him an email. There's no law of 7 anymore. We are interconnected in all that we do. Now, that doesn't mean the Pope's going to respond to me. But the fact of the matter is, if I've got reason to do business with somebody anywhere in the world, I can find a way to get to them very, very rapidly, pretty much at the speed of light. Okay. So Metcalfe's law, when I wrote the book Techonomics, was all about the network being hardwired together, more hardwired interfaces 5 years ago. What does it mean now? The cloud. We don't even have to have wires anymore. We're connected and we're online all the time, 7/24/365. So Metcalfe's law. Now, this guy Ronald Coase was a graduate student back in the 1920s in England. And he came to the United States with one question in mind. And you got to think about history and time frame. This was with the rise of Marxism, and the intellectual thought process at the time was that statism and socialism was a wonderful way to govern. And this guy was an economist, and he came to the United States because he didn't understand if the government wasn't telling you how many people to hire in an enterprise, how did a company figure out how many people to hire? So he had one question. In a capitalistic marketplace, a free marketplace, how does a company determine how many people it's going to have working? He went to the Ford Motor Company at the River Rouge plant in Dearborn, Michigan. Those of you, take you back in time, Ford was the guy that really figured out mass manufacturing. And as a result of that, he was taking at this plant dirt, iron ore, coal, and a couple weeks later turning out millions of Model Ts, about 1926 time frame. Okay? That's what we call vertically integrated, okay? I'm starting with dirt and coal and iron ore, and out goes a finished product, and very little other finished goods came in to make that happen. Now, today, you know, the buzzword is logistics. It is about, and we don't, quote, manufacture automobiles anymore. Ford Motor Company is no more a manufacturer of automobiles than anything else they make. They are an assembler of automobiles. They buy the tires from you, the bearings from you, the engines from you, the fenders from you, bring it all together in a very orchestrated and wonderful logistics situation. So Coast comes into this situation, starts studying this vertically integrated Ford Motor Company. And what he comes out with, and he writes a paper on this in the 1930s called Transaction Cost Analysis. And he theorizes that if Ford had better information about what was out there and where it was, that ultimately as you had better and better information, you would make less and less and you would buy more and more. So transaction cost analysis is a nice big word for the make or buy decision. So think about that first one, make or buy decision. Did you make lunch today or did you buy it? Yeah. If you want to save a couple of bucks, you brought your peanut butter and jelly sandwich. All right. Did you make your clothes or did you buy them? Now, we've gotten into an environment where we buy just about everything. But if you think back a couple of generations to your grandparents or whatever living on the farm, they made a lot of stuff. We buy it now because of these logistics chains that make it easier and easier and cheaper for us to procure it. So, make or buy decision and this thought process that with perfect information, that pendulum would swing from the make side for an enterprise to the buy side for the enterprise. Fast forward to the 1970s, and lo and behold, the Japanese begin to figure this out in the automotive industry. They're no longer vertically integrated, but Honda makes great motors, engines, so Toyota starts buying engines from Honda. And Toyota makes great transmissions, so Honda starts buying transmissions from Toyota. And they start specializing in what they do the best, and they start heading towards this, this mode of being assemblers, not fundamental manufacturers. And in some senses, the Japanese handed the United States their head in their hands as a result of that organization, because they used the most efficient production methods for each one of those items. You know, fast forward to the 1990s, guess who gets the Nobel Prize in economics for a paper written in the 1930s? Ronald Coase. It took him 60 years to figure it out. But the key here is his concept of perfect information. We live in a world where nothing's perfect, but the perfection of information does have some characteristics. What would be a characteristic of perfect information if you could have perfect information? Help me out.
It's liquid, how it spreads between people, as fast as you want it to.
It's fast, okay? Speed of light, all right? Okay, so the information is available quickly. Give me something else that would be a characteristic of perfect information. Want to help me out?
I have no idea.
Okay.
It's correct.
It's correct. It's correct, or at least it's adjudicated, right? But if it's perfect, it's correct. All right, so it's fast and correct. Anything else?
Complete.
It's complete. It's not a part of the picture. It's all a picture. Fast, correct, complete.
Accessible to everyone.
Easily accessible. Okay, so you're tracking with me. You're tracking with me the characteristics of perfect information. Now, what does that start sounding like? If I've got an on-ramp in your pocket anywhere that you are, it's pretty accessible, right? If it's moving at the speed of light anywhere in the world, it's pretty fast, isn't it? If it's adjudicated because I bought that widget from you last week and you did a great job on delivering it, okay? I bought that widget from you 2 weeks ago and you were late and it had a nick in it, okay? What does that sound like? It sounds like some of the reviews of things on eBay or the reviews of vendors on Amazon, etc. Okay? So, I'm not saying to you we have absolutely perfect information, but I am saying because of the first law and the second law, we have something in our pocket that at the speed of light connects us to this massive amount of information that completely is a game changer. And that's what the make or buy decision is about. And so what you see now is more and more organizations are swinging to the buy side than to the make side. And it's all about the logistics trail. Your weakest link is the one that gets you. So, that is a very, very fast overview of Techonomics. Now think about, first of all, how long in the history of humanity have those three laws been active and working together? Want to give me a number? There's not a right or wrong answer. How about it, Patrick? How long have you had?
50 years?
Well, we haven't had the internet for 50 years, okay? And so you've got to have the internet for all of this, the nonlinear search that's available by Google. You know, it's another thing of perfect information. I go right to it. I don't have to linearly scroll through everything to get to it. So, you know, Google's been around, I think it celebrated its
14th.
14th with the little candles last couple days ago, okay? We're really only talking the last 10 years, that these things have truly been in place for the masses. Okay. What kind of changes have they wrought? And when I'm talking about changes, I'm talking about the way we do commerce. Remember, techonomics. Technology that doesn't get utilized in the economic side of things ends up like the dinosaurs. There's a bunch of ideas that never go anywhere. But I'm asking you to think with me, what industries in your lifetime have completely changed as a result of this perfect information and the way that we're going from things that used to be tangible to things that are virtual? There's some obvious ones.
Education, maybe not completely.
Education is the next target on the list. Okay, it's in process with Khan Academy, if you're familiar with that, with University of Phoenix, those approaches, and with the internet itself. I mean, there's been more video minutes uploaded in YouTube in the last 2 months than the entirety of ABC, CBS, and NBC in its entire 60 years of operation. Yeah, that's an eye twister. That's a head twister. Now, certainly all of the information on YouTube is questionable. Some of it is. But the point of the matter is that there's a diversity of information there. So let's talk about industries. You mentioned education. I think it's on the chopping block in the next 5 years. It's not quite there yet. It's holding on. Give me some industries that have completely changed as a result of the 3 laws that I'm talking to you about.
Media, like we used to have
Media,
CDs.
what kind of media?
CDs, we used to have VHSs, which are now DVDs, Blu-rays, ultraviolet, and we don't even have
Right.
it.
So the industry, quote unquote, television, all right, and how we used to deliver it, or music. Music is an obvious choice. 30 years ago, music was 8 tracks, and then it went to cassettes, and then it went to CDs, and then it went to iPads, and now you don't even need an iPod, now you don't even need an iPod because it's on your phone, all right? Now, that's about 5 generations that have occurred in the last 15 years in rapid succession. What's happened to the industry? Business guys, tell me what's happened to the industry as a result.
Some shambles, nobody's buying any music anymore.
Well, in all honesty, about 95% of the music that's downloaded is downloaded illegally, not paid for. All right? So you got music publishers, shambles is probably a fair word. Okay? You got music publishers that are trying to figure out how do we create a business model out of this. All right? Very, very challenging time. What's another industry that looks almost exactly like the music industry, only it's about 5 years behind it?
News?
Pardon?
News?
News? Tell me how you're thinking.
Well, people aren't really reading as many newspapers. They're going online for their news.
Okay, so who stands to lose with the change in news? Tell me who's at risk.
News organizations and things like that.
Wall
Well,
Street
paper
Journal
actually would
published.
be
Yeah,
paper makers.
the newspaper, all right? Number one, the newspaper, and if you look at trends and all this, well, the reason I want you to be cognizant of trends is because if you set a dream and a goal and a desire of what you want to do as a business person, and it's not working with these trends, it's working against these trends, that's kind of like getting out in the Mississippi River in your rowboat and trying to row upstream. You may work really hard and you make very, very little progress. So, newspapers. You can get all sorts of statistics about the shrinking of newspapers' size and the number of newspapers and the circulation. So what's replacing it?
Websites.
You go get your news. Well, you get whatever news you want wherever you want it, right? In your pocket. Okay, now there's another set of news agencies that are at risk currently. Any thoughts?
I'd say television's getting increasingly at risk because so many people are going to the internet for their news to watch them.
Okay. When I was your age, there were 3 channels, ABC, CBS, NBC. You wanted to get your news, you sat down at 6:30 at night with your popcorn and you watched the news. Huntley Brinkley or Cronkite. That was it. All right. Now what do you have as far as choices of news? There's no agglomeration at all. I can tell you how you vote by you tell me where your news source is. Really easy, right? You're laughing, but you know it's the truth. All I got to do is ask you, where do you get your news? And I can tell whether you're conservative or liberal, whether you're Republican or Democrat, or whether you don't care. Okay. And so as a result, what used to be 3 channels that could just about commandeer whatever they wanted for a 30-second ad, now They're getting a smaller and smaller and smaller cross-section of people. And that is tremendously affecting their revenues. When it begins to affect their revenues, they cut back inside. They don't have the staff to perform what they needed to do, so they start borrowing content from other people. That's the reason you can turn it on any of the 3 channels and get exactly the same news, even some of the same words. Okay. So we've got news. It's affected the newspaper. It's affected the broadcast news. We've got the music industry being rapidly changed. Now, let's look further at the music industry. What else about the music industry besides the publisher has been massively changed because of this new economy?
Radio?
Okay, I'm in the supply chain now of music. I'm in the supply chain of music. How did you used to get your music when it was on a CD?
Any physical form is pretty much outdated. CDs or anything, it's all, I mean.
Yeah, and maybe I'm just so old and gray that this is way over you because you haven't lived it. But where did you used to go to get your CDs? Record shop. Either, you know, mail order or you went to a record shop. So, can you name one of the major record shops?
FYE,
Pardon me?
FYE.
FYE, Tower Records, those kinds of places. Where would you go right now if I said you need to go buy a physical piece of music? Any of you know?
Walmart.
Okay, Walmart and Target, and it's getting smaller and smaller as far as their rack space, right? Because they adjudicate their rack space by how much money flows through that rack space. If it doesn't get its square footage needs, hey, we'll put something else on that square footage. But all of the record shops per se that were there, the Tower Records and those kinds of things, they're gone. What about books? What has happened with books?
Electronic.
Okay, we started with these things, right? At the corner bookstore. We started with a mom and pop bookstore in every small town. Then what happened? Well, the big guys came in. They let the franchise do the back office so they were more efficient, quantity buying, lower price, I could outsell you. You know, you go to mom and pop and you pay retail. You go to the chain bookstores and you pay 10% off, right? Okay, and Books A Million, Borders, Barnes and Noble, right? Oh, but Borders is gone, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, and Barnes and Noble's just about on the block, aren't they? Oh, yeah. You see where I'm going? Because Amazon came along. And Amazon comes along and they have 10 times the number of offerings. And they've got a half dozen warehouses around the country. Right? Amazon spent most of its initial public offering building automated warehouses to minimize the labor to distribute books. And then they realized everybody's coming to us for books. We don't even need to have the books. You know, Amazon does most of its selling now, right? You want a book? Come to Amazon. He's got it. Oh, 50 cents for me doing it. Great business model if you get it. I passed 2 electrons and I got 50 cents. Okay. And then Amazon goes, well, as long as we're going to lead in the book stuff, why do we even need these things? Right? So they do what? They create the Kindle. And now, you know, the $20 book, they get $16 for it, but they got absolutely no cost of goods. They've got no shipping costs. They've got no nothing. And the one knock on the deal was I want the book now and I got to wait 2 days for it to get shipped to me. Now, you want the book now? I have to about 15 seconds, all right, if you're on an internet. You see how this stuff's changing? Now, you see how it's changing. You are living this stuff. But you guys that are in business, you gals that are in business, need to be thinking, what's that doing to the business model? What happened in that business model? Let's see if my pen will hold out here. If I'm selling you a real book, and I'm the publisher, okay, that real book goes to a warehouse, then it goes to a store, then it goes to you, okay? It's all apart there, right? Publisher, warehouse, store, you. There's labor in that chain everywhere, right? There's utilities in that chain. There's transportation in that chain. There's, so we got labor, we've got real estate, we've got utilities, we've got transportation, and we've got a lot of touches, don't we? That's the way books were sold to you in 1995. That was the only way books were sold to you in 1995, right? Then Amazon comes along. Well, what does Amazon do? Publisher goes to the warehouse, but there's only one of these. Realize that there had to be one of these stores within, say, 15 miles of me, anywhere in the country, so I could get my books. I mean, I'm not going to drive 100 miles to get a book. So I've got store after store after store all over the country with a checkout person and a stocking person and a night watchman, and I've got a bunch of labor that maybe services 2 people a day, except on weekends when they have 50 people a day. Nice lifestyle, it all works. Now, Amazon comes along and says, hey, the store is your portable computer, boom, comes straight to you via UPS. And you didn't really save too much money because the discount that they got eaten up by the shipping. But then they started figuring out how to get more and more discount, and they gave you free shipping if you ordered in quantity. Right? So what happened to all of these jobs? Where'd they go? Poof. Right? Now I can't give you numbers, but you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. Next thing that happened is Amazon said, hey, I don't need to have this warehouse. I'm just going to take you, the buyer, straight to the publisher, and the publisher is going to use UPS straight to you. All right? Another cut in efficiency. No warehouse. Let the publisher worry about it. Then Amazon said, all right, why don't we just forget about making tangible publications, and we go to the publisher only because they represent the author, and this thing comes in the ether to you immediately. Each one of those is more and more highly efficient. Now, I'm not here to tell you this is good or this is bad. I'm just here to tell you it is. Because what you got to realize is the customer, the consumer, is who we get into business to satisfy. We don't get into business to make $1 million. We get into business to satisfy people's needs. If we do it well enough, we make money. What that customer wants to do is read. They don't necessarily care whether they got it at the local bookstore, whether it came from a warehouse, whether it came directly from a publisher, whether it's electrons or whether it's atoms. They want to read. And the more they can read for the cheaper, the better. You got to figure out ways to compete, because if you don't compete here, you go out of business. These are the kinds of things that those Techonomic 3 laws are causing to happen, the trends that are happening. So that's my Techonomic story. I'm going to stop there just a second and see. Any thoughts, comments? Whatever. Yeah, Patrick.
Where do you see the trend going of replacing efficient technology with efficient labor costs? Like, do you see that? This is happening everywhere, it's not just books. So
Yeah.
where does it leave? Where does it leave us? Does that leave us with everyone without a job and computers doing it all, or what?
Okay. Where are these trends leading? And it's a great question, and I wish I had a great answer for it. Okay, my first answer is I don't know. My second question is probably not very comforting. I think we're in the midst of an upheaval of society that's equivalent to the Civil War back in the 1860s. Okay? Because what caused the Civil War, what happened in the Civil War was the massive displacement of labor from being this kind of labor. Now, I'm not a slavery guy, okay? Don't get me wrong, I'm not condoning that. I'm saying we had a lot of people that worked to produce food. About 80% of the U.S. population at the time was involved in the direct growing and producing and distributing of food. Right? We're at 2% now, and we're producing more food. So that means we had 78% that had to find something else to do. Well, when you're 45 and you got to find something else to do, and you know one thing, it's a hard thing to do. Okay? We're in the point now where the mind, bureaucratic labor. So what's bureaucratic labor? That's labor that can be done. It's kind of repetitive mental task, not repetitive physical task. So let's collimate what some of those things are. It's checking out at the grocery store. That's bureaucratic labor. Give me your money. Okay. So what are you starting to see at some of the major stores? Self-checkout, right? What are you going to see when you get RFID, radio frequency identification tags, and Wiegand wire on your credit card? I'm just going to walk through this thing. You know, here goes my. Oh, your bill's $150. Give me your card. Boom. Put it in the machine. The gate opens and I'm out. Right? bureaucratic labor, the phone tree, when you call,